Hi. Thanks very much for coming out so early and standing. I appreciate it. So I'm going to be reading a few things today, so please forgive me. I couldn't. You'll understand why in a minute. So thank you to Stuart, Airbnb, and Creative Mornings for having me today, and thanks for coming out so early and having coffee with me. If you've been to any other Creative Mornings in this series, then you know that we're talking about heritage. Heritage is defined as something inherited from the past or passed down by tradition. Ask someone about their heritage, and they'll usually tell you about where they're from, where their families are from, or where they were born, how they grew up, etc. We use these facts to talk about value. What were the values we carry from one generation to the next? When I think about my own heritage and the valuable things that I have been passed down to me, most of them have been words. Many of these words came from advice, my mom, teachers, but most often they came from lectures, casual emails, and mentors. Even though they may not have been intended as advice, I still found wisdom in them, and I try to carry out that wisdom today. I am not wise, but the smartest thing I have done, maybe the smartest thing any of us can do, is listen. So I've been thinking about that, about other people, and I've been thinking about other people's words and the impact they've had on me. I've also been curious about the words that have impacted other people. In other words, what influenced the people who have influenced me? So that's what I want to talk to you about today. The words and insight that influenced me and the wisdom that's influenced some of my heroes. Maybe some of it will influence you. So the first comes from my mom. When I was in high school, she always told me, do what you love. And I think a lot of moms probably tell you that. But it was something that really helped carry me through and give me this lens to look through when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. So I decided not to go to college as they wanted me to go and pursue punk rock. And that's not probably what she meant when she said, do what you love. But it sounds weird, and a part of me needed my mom's permission to be a musician. It was harder work than I thought, and I imagined it would, be pretty hard, but didn't realize it was going to be living with nothing but a futon and a stereo. It was basically below poverty level. So we did that for about 10 years, and then eventually we signed to a major label, MCA Universal, and everything kind of changed at that time. I was able to buy a proper bed and get health insurance. But we recorded 7 albums, and we did the first 5 Warped Tours and toured with bands like Sublime, Rancid, Jawbreaker from the Bay Area, woo, and Fugazi. It's a tremendous gift to be able to do what you love for a living. These days I make my living as a creative, and I love it just as much. But I wouldn't be here without music and my mom's support in giving me those words. So when I finally got burnt out on touring, I had no idea what else I wanted to do with my life. And a good friend of mine said, hey, you should be a designer. And he said, the only thing I remember you liking more than playing bass was making the flyers for our gigs. So, and I use the term design very lightly, because I had no idea that what I was doing was design. I was at Kinko's, cutting out type and enlarging, and they were going, okay, it's time, beat it, dude, it's time to leave. So I took his advice and I went back to design school. And that taught me sometimes people see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And sometimes they say things to you that you don't even say to yourself. So I started me on this design journey. And I went back to school and I immersed myself in a whole new world. New terms, people, mentors, influences. When I was playing music, we looked up to other bands. And now in design, I was looking up to other designers. So one of the first design conferences I went to, one of the speakers, Terry Marks, during his talk, it was an hour-long talk, but he had this phrase that said, do work that you believe in. And it really resonated with me. I know he probably didn't mean it as advice, but I took it as advice. And so, it was like the simple things from contributing a poster to the Hurricane Poster Project during Katrina. That was like my first way of sort of doing like my passion towards a cause I believed in. The sales of this poster raised a few $1,000s, and it really helped people during that crisis. And it was the first time it really showed me the power of design does change people's lives. I had always heard that, but I kind of thought it was bullshit until I actually saw it in action. So after that, I did some, it was really inspiring to be a part of that. So when the wildfires went through Southern California, I started my own project called the SoCal Fire Poster Project. And it's similarly, what it was is we have artists design and print posters. They send them to us, and then we sell them online and donate the money to the cause. Pretty simple, but it was really a great way for myself to contribute to causes I believed in, and then also get others to join me. Then 2010, I started another project for the Haiti efforts. And again, this was about 510 designers from around the world that joined me in this project. In 2008, I did this poster with friend Rafael Lopez as part of Shepard Fairey's Artist for Obama when he did the Hope poster. So, when we did this poster, we designed it and designed a website to sell them, and then we funneled the money back to the campaign. But this woman purchasing the poster sort of changed everything. And the poster flew out the door, and the campaign took notice, and 4 years later called me and asked me if I wanted to be the design director for the 2012 campaign. So, like I said, in addition to the words that have moved me, I've been thinking about the words that made an impact on others. So I reached out to a few friends, and I asked the question, what are the most inspirational words you have heard? And so I wanted to read, this is the part where I read, some of the responses that I got back. So Jessica, she couldn't quite remember exactly what it was, and so she CC'd me in on an email to her mom. She says, Mom, what was that thing that you always used to tell me? So the saying that I passed, this is what her mom wrote to me. The saying that I pass on to my children is that my father always told me, never do anything you wouldn't want splashed across the cover of the New York Times. My family is from New Jersey, very close to New York City, and the New York Times is very well known in my house. The Sunday New York Times was a 4-hour Sunday event for my parents with Giants football in the background. They revered the Times almost as much as the Giants. Don Clark wrote to me, stay hungry, stay foolish. It's a quote from Steve Jobs. This might be the life mantra for Invisible Creature. From the get-go, we jumped into this thing head first without a clue how to actually do it. We loved art, we loved music, and that was it. We learned a lot over the last 14 years, but to be honest, that spirit of hold on, this thing might get bumpy, has stuck with us. I'm still just as excited to go to work as I was when I started this thing. I can't tell you how thankful I am for that. This one comes from his dad. He wrote, "Don't worry about what others are doing. Do what's best for you and your family, because that's all that matters in the end." He writes, "I literally think about this every single day for one reason or another. Anytime I feel I'm stuck in a problem where I am compromising my values or something like that, I think about it, follow my gut, and things always turn out for the best. Best advice I ever could ask for, and it applies perfectly to every single scenario." So Jessica Walsh, hers was real short. She just said, "One of the best pieces I ever heard, Josh, was say yes and figure it out later." Next one comes from my best friend and bandmate O. His comes from a 1960s cartoon, Tudor Turtle, and says, "Be just who you is, not who you is not. Folks like that are the happiest lot." Brian Singer, he writes, "The best advice I ever received was from David C. Baker, a consultant, who at a conference told everyone in the audience to double the prices. People freaked out to hear that. They said, 'I can't, I'll lose all my clients.' He said, 'Yep, you will. You'll work half as much and earn the same amount of money.'" Armin Witt wrote me, "I don't have a specific quote or source. I've only recently discovered it as it relates to running. It's advice about recovering from an injury or stopping when something hurts. I found it applicable to other things. It's basically reminding yourself that the goal is to run for a lifetime, not just for today or tomorrow. So when something hurts, instead of powering through, because that's what a tough person does, and you don't want to be a pussy, you should take a breather and remember that you're playing the long game. Rest today, recover, think about shit, then try again when you're ready." If you've ever heard Armin speak, that's totally Armin. Rebecca wrote, "I have a picture in my head. It's an image of my father sitting at a wobbly rustic wood table, looking out the window as he prepared his Sunday sermons. He would craft his good words and stories, small and amazing, gently weaving observations together and then profoundly knocking your socks off with his conclusions about life, love, and each other. Through this, Dad taught me gratitude. It wasn't explicit advice, but by watching him dissect the world around us, I learned to observe and be grateful for the fireflies, the lone birch tree, eye contact, the lessons learned from conflict or interdependencies. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to sit at that table with my dad and read to him a poem he gave me over 20 years ago, a poem he was weaving into one of his sermons. I have kept it with me all this time in my wallet just in case I'd need it. It was from E.E. Cummings, and the poem goes, "I thank God for the most amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and blue dream of the sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes, I who have died am alive again. And this is the sun's birthday. This is the birth of life, of love and wings, and of the gay, happy, limitless earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any, lifted from the no of all nothing, human merely being doubt, unimaginable you. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened." E.E. Cummings. Don Hancock wrote, "One of my favorites from Rick Valenti, probably 10 years ago. It's not business, it's personal. That simple statement alone was all I needed to hear, to know I was on the right path, and to always remember at the end of the day, this is about people, not money. It certainly was what I felt instinctively, but because I started the business so young and with zero experience, I honestly second-guessed every decision I made for the first 5 years. Having someone as established, well-respected, and obviously amazing underline that sentiment for me was huge. It really speaks to the core of what we do here." Mickey wrote, "I think all All are in the position of leadership at one point or another, whether it's an employer, manager, or mentor, sometimes even informally. If you set an example for someone, you've been a leader. In high school, junior ROTC, one of the first lessons I learned was to praise cadets in public, but reprimand them in private. Even as a teenage squad leader with responsibility for 6 or 7 underclassmen, that was a fundamental leadership principle. Yet decades later, in some fairly sophisticated corporate environments, I see CEOs and other executive managers tearing into their junior staffers in group meetings or in plain sight and earshot of other staffers and colleagues. It's shocking, and to me sends the message that the manager or executive is to be feared, not respected, or that they haven't had the basic training or instinct to be a true leader, one who sets an example for others to follow and inspires them not to terrorize them to do so. Paul Frank. Almost 20 years ago, I got into reading about my 2 design heroes, Charles and Ray Eames. Beyond their amazing design, Charles had some really great quotes. I've never memorized any of them, but always were inspired by them. Here's my favorite, and I do believe it rings true for the many of us in our circle of self-made friends. And it reads, I don't believe in this gifted few concept, just in people doing things they're really interested in doing. They have a way of getting good at whatever it is. Charles Eames. He writes, pretty good, right? Annie MacDonald. When I was young, my father told me that there would always be someone better than me. No matter what it was, there was going to be someone somewhere that was better than me. It always seemed a pretty harsh thing to tell a kid. As I entered adulthood and began to navigate my career as a professional skateboarder, I finally started to understand the wisdom in that what he told me. You have to be the best that yourself can possibly be, and not to be the best there is, but that's not the goal. Without excuse, without compromise, and most importantly, without making comparisons, be the best that you can be at what you do. Pooms is amazing. She writes, when I was a little girl growing up in Thailand, as you know, it's very tropical there. I used to tell my mom that I wanted to see the snow, and she would tell me nothing is impossible. Now here I am living in Washington, D.C., in the USA, running my own business. And she said, she didn't want to email me her. She said, can we get on the phone? And I said, okay. So this is all transcribed. But she wrote, I got to tell you one more. And I said, okay. She said, the other is, you know when you fly and you go through this, they go through the safety procedures? When it gets to that one that says the passenger should always fit his or her own mask before helping others requiring assistance, I think that's true in life. You can't help anyone if you don't have your own shit together. Next comes from Christopher Simmons. Years ago, before I had my own firm, I arrived at work to find a coworker had left a note on my desk. It read, no intern today. Please arrange to get 5 sandwiches. I was a senior designer at the time and in negotiations to become a partner. There was a junior designer on staff, just a year or so out of school, and I thought to myself, why the fuck doesn't he have to get the sandwiches? I was righteously pissed off. If you think I have an ego now, imagine me back then. I got the sandwiches, but I deeply resented it. I resented it so much that I kept the note for 12 years, now as a memento to the indignity I felt it caused me. I haven't looked at that note in years. I found it randomly the day after my 40th birthday, the same day that coworker, my friend, lost her battle with cancer. As I paused to remember her, it wasn't the day that came to mind. It was that thoughtful and kind that she taught me the thoughtful and kindness that she taught me every day. Now I keep that note for a different reason. I keep it to remind me to keep things in perspective. I keep it as a talisman of humanity and humility. I keep it to remind myself that when I declare bold that there is nothing I cannot do, that includes getting 5 sandwiches. Pete, it's better to keep your mouth shut and appear stupid than open your mouth and remove all doubt. My grandfather would always say this to me, and years later I learned it was a Mark Twain quote. I truly believe in his word that they are words to live by and can be taken many ways. I think it also applies to asking obvious questions. I do not believe that there is no dumb questions, just dumb answers philosophy. I believe you need to figure things out for yourself, and out of laziness, most would prefer just to ask for the answer. I thought that was pretty harsh coming from Pete. It's like he's a musician, he should just be a little mellow. Next comes from Debbie. She writes, when I was a little girl, whenever my grandmother was frustrated with me about anything, of course I had no memory of what it could have been, I would pout and say, "You don't love me," which I realize now was a very manipulative tactic. She always melted and reassured me that she loved and adored me. And then I'd get my way with whatever bad behavior I was doing. One day, when I was once again up to my usual shenanigans, she chilled to me, and I asked my usual, I told her my usual, "You don't love me," wah moments, expecting her to cave in yet again. Instead, she said something I'll never forget, and I used many, many times in both to be candid and reassuring with the people in my life that I might have moments with. She blinked twice, and then without missing a beat, she said, "Deborah, my darling granddaughter, I will always love you, but right now, I don't like you very much." Nathan and Katie, they set two separate ones. Katie's reads, things always look better framed. This most often came up while walking through an art museum and referenced how the right frame or presentation could really make a difference in the art. It's something that has always stuck with me, that presentation is a big part and a continuation of the work. Nate writes, do what you do because you love it and go off. That was from his friend Eric Olson of the Process Type Foundry. Eric was actually referencing a quote from his high school music teacher, one that continued to inspire him as well. For me, it wasn't so much of a new way of looking at the world, but more as a realization of how I have to be living ever since I can remember. An energized reminder to keep working hard and do what you love. Michael wrote, I have quoted Massimo many times on this subject, but in case you don't mind one more, Josh, here's what he always said. Good work leads to more good work. Bad work leads to more bad work. The only way to do good work is to do good work. Adam writes, the best piece of advice I ever received was from Joseph Campbell. Follow your bliss. However, I'm very careful with sharing this out of context, as I think it means more than just do what makes you happy. I think it goes back to the idea of base human happiness and what it means to be consistently aware of man's morality at all times. I believe in the phrase as a big picture statement, a kind of practical social human happiness and leaving good energy wherever you go. Tony wrote me, keep control of your brand or idea, even if it's not the most lucrative option. This came up at a time, in my experience, while making my first video games and fighting to keep control. At one point, they offered to buy my name. And then this one I had to read the whole email because I'm so proud of it. He writes, Josh, thanks again for all you did in 2012. This was a professional advice I received while managing the campaign. Called my office on a landline, that's how we did things, to say at 11 p.m., early in the campaign. He called, asked for me, I figured he'd be thrilled that I was still in the office. He asked, what was I doing? I answered, nothing highly pressing. He surprised me by saying, I didn't hire you to stay in the office until 11 p.m. I hired you to think. It had an impact on me. Of course, sometimes you have no option but to pull an all-nighter or to work deep into the night. But if you are in charge of something, you have to find ways to elevate yourself and look over the horizon. And the last one comes from Aaron Joplin. Trust me on this one. If you ever seen Aaron speak, he uses his hands a lot. Trust me on this one. You'll meet a lot of people who don't know how to have laugh, and then those who do. And sadly, I'll forever be blown away by their ability to kill the spirit in a meeting or on a project, or hell, out of life. Maybe this seriousness is called growing up, maybe not. The joy, the wonder, the whimsy, you have to perfect those things. Hold them close, and don't be afraid to turn up the volume on them whenever you can. I try to keep shit fun. Know when you need to be on point, but also don't be afraid to get a little loose. Doing a good job and having a good time while doing it should be a mutual thing. So, all right, so how do I wrap this up? Talks are a little bit about like relationships. They're easy to start and hard to end, but hopefully the time in the middle was meaningful. These are just a few of the words from some of the people that I have helped make my life meaningful. Obviously, there are many more, but these are just some that I thought might resonate with you. I'm incredibly grateful for everything so far. I'm grateful for the wisdom of the people who are older than me and more experienced and frankly more talented. I'm grateful for my friends and colleagues whose ideas inspire me every day. I'm grateful for my teachers, and I'm grateful for my mom. I'm grateful to be a part of this amazing creative heritage we have. And I'm grateful to be here today to pass on to you, hopefully, something that's been passed on to me. Hopefully there's something, maybe just one thing, maybe just 7 words that will inspire you, as Adam Garcia says, to follow your bliss. And after you do, pass it on. Thanks.